is Robin Ayoub from the Localization Fireside Chat, and welcome to another episode. I think this one here, we're recording episode 195. So thanks for joining me again on this journey since the beginning. 2.5 years ago, I started the Localization Fireside Chat as a replacement to a coffee conversation, which we used to take people out for coffee or get together for lunch. And that was replaced with a Zoom call and Teams call and other video conferencing tools out there. So I decided, okay, why don't we record these coffee type conversations, and hence the inception of the Localization Fireside Chat. So episode 195 is special to me. We are hosting a special guest with us today. Joshua Altman is the founder and managing director of Beltway Media. And I can't wait to get to know you, Joshua. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time. Allow me to take a sip of water. Been doing recording all day, so that's normally what happens when you're talking all the time. I really appreciate your time with me. So as we say on this channel, Joshua, everybody's got a story. So why don't we start with this? What's your story?
I started out as a journalist. I was a multimedia journalist with the Hill newspaper in DC. I was doing a lot of video, web content writing. I left that thinking I would be a freelance reporter for a few years and then go back to a newsroom full time. And I never went back to a newsroom full time. While looking for jobs as a freelance reporter, there were corporate jobs as well. People wanted a mix of tech background, people who could do website content creation development. They wanted someone who had a lot of writing experience, who could write on a lot of topics, who could pick up topics quickly. And they also wanted someone who had a visual background in photo and video. And I had all of those. Doing that, I found that there was a need for this with small and medium businesses, for people and firms that combined all this in a way that was accessible and affordable to small and medium businesses. And that's how we ended up doing what we do now as fractional chief communications officers.
And I'm sure some of our listeners who are used to using the mute and unmute button can relate to this. I'm sorry about that one. So you have a very interesting background, Joshua. You've spent years at the Hill as a multimedia journalist covering federal policy, election cycles. And what made you make the change? I mean, everybody goes through changes in life, but something must have happened to get you to say, okay, I'm moving out from this and I would like to start something new. Is there a trigger, or is there a fork in the road that drove you there? Or?
No, I had been doing that for a long time. I love doing it. I thought I would do it as a freelance reporter, doing pretty much the same thing, but with different outlets, and then go back to a newsroom. And then it sort of naturally evolved into what we do now. There was no day that I sat down and said, I'm going to shift from journalism to corporate communications. It really happened naturally as I saw this need among small and medium-sized businesses and startups as well, because they wanted this combination of skills that they didn't have, and they wanted it accessible to them.
And hence, corporate communication CCO, I guess, corporate communication officer, right? Is that what you're doing right now?
Chief communications officer, yes.
Yes, that's what you do.
What we do is we focus on two main areas: shaping perception and building and maintaining trust. That is the core role of the chief communications officer. So it's different than a chief marketing officer. It's different than the chief brand officer. Those are much better known. You're going to see this role become a lot more common, the chief communications officer. It's already becoming more common with Fortune 100s, Fortune 500. You're seeing it at major sports franchises where they have a lot of communications needs. They're bringing all of these functions, all the communications functions, internal and external, under one department to really focus on an integrated, big picture view of how messaging impacts the reputation, growth, and stakeholder trust.
Shape and perception. That's a very interesting comment or service, I guess, that you offer. One of the podcasts I did a few podcasts earlier that was published about a few weeks ago now was an expert in storytelling, which also centered around perception. She was from South Africa, and I did the podcast where we published it a few weeks ago. And that was the center of the conversation. From your perspective, the shaping perception services, how it's done now, how is it done now in the modern space that we live in?
You touched right on it. It's storytelling. And we're working to develop that consistent storytelling across your internal and external channels. And we focus on consistency because we don't want different messages going out to different stakeholders. Sometimes you think we can put this out internally. We could say something a little different in our marketing, that doesn't work as well as it might have used to, because anyone could take a picture with their phone of your internal memo and it's on the internet in seconds. You can't have that divide. You really do need to be consistent. When it comes to how we do that, we focus on a couple of different things. We use a 3-tier framework, story, narrative, and brand. Story is the stuff that happened. It's the facts, it's how you tell it. Narrative answers questions. And brand it's the stuff, it's the swag, it's everything people interact with, from your website to pens and t-shirts. It's the stuff. Videos are part of your brand. Press releases are part of your brand. They're all telling that narrative based on your story.
And in the storytelling portion, the persistency of the stories and the consistency of those messaging across channels or across however you want to measure this, internally, externally. Has there been any research on this one? What was the outcome?
In terms of consistency, you'll see consistency matters. Consistency, like you mentioned, both, sometimes you can be a little too much. You'll see this in the algorithms. If you have too much that doesn't get engagement, it thinks you're a low value poster, you might not do as well. Persistency versus balancing what you do is important. We say that everything should provide value. An ad for an ad's sake doesn't provide value. Give information, be useful. Be consistent in how you do it. A lot of times we'll hear, well, we're told we need to post 3 times a week. We need to be consistent to get our message out. Yes, but don't do 3 times a week if you don't have something valuable that's useful. That will ultimately come back and hurt you. If 1 week you only have 2 things, that's fine. If you have 4, that's fine. These aren't laws of nature. They don't exist just by virtue of existing. You can do pretty much whatever you want, and there's no limit that's going to stop you besides how people react to it.
And you bring a very valid point, because most people out there, they think by throwing more content at the channel, they're going to get more engagement. They're going to get more visibility. The more they flood the waves, as they say. But what you seem to be promoting is more high quality content versus the number of content.
That's what you need to do, is high quality. And high quality means a few different things. It means useful. It means valuable. It doesn't mean Hollywood quality video for every 30-second clip you post. You don't need that. That might actually backfire in some cases. What we're seeing a lot now is people want authenticity. It's something we talk a lot about in our newsletters, is authenticity. Authenticity, real content from real people, does better than perfectly polished Hollywood slick video content, because we get so much of it, like you mentioned, that on every feed, everywhere, we're seeing stuff all the time. Because people are so persistent, people are now very attuned to the fact that this was produced, this was made. It's one of those reasons people talking in car videos does very well. It's very authentic. If you produce your videos too authentic or write something a little too perfect, people might tune out. There's a very fine line between very low production quality that people can't see, they can't hear you, and overproduced. And it's going to depend on the company. It's going to depend on each individual listener, viewer, how they perceive that, where it's too much versus not enough. But that's where you need to be.
Mm-hmm. And your background sort of gives you that, if correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua, give you that unique positioning in terms of, your journalism training, for example, which you work under a lot of deadline, a lot of pressure, maybe skeptical audience in the mix as well. You want to satisfy that. What is the single thing that you probably in your training that gave you a bit of I would say, an edge in your communication role today?
It was that I was a multimedia producer, that I was looking at how different forms of content interact with each other.
Yeah.
And having a background in video production. Video is bigger now than it's ever been. When we talk about content, we really focus on our 4-language model, 4 ways people really experience communication. The first one is read. That's the one people kind of get the most. See what you see. Obviously, with watching a podcast, you're seeing this, what you hear, listening to things like listening to a podcast, and then experience, which is the one that gets the most confusion and where people kind of get hung up thinking about. It's big experiential events. It's pop-ups, it's conferences, it's sign holders on the street, but it's also how people experience what they read, see, and hear. So how you experience viewing us on this podcast versus someone like me who listens to podcasts while driving, while walking the dog. I'm listening, I'm not watching. So that's a very different experience. If you navigate in an app versus a mobile browser versus on your desktop, those are three different experiences that we all have every day dealing with content. And that's how we think about it. And in my training, looking at the text, looking at the video, the audio, how all these things come together, editing the content really helped me understand those four languages.
You mentioned podcast. You do podcasts quite a bit. And what's the effect of podcast on launching a business or driving a message out? How often do you need to do it? Who are these podcasts that you should probably go on for the audience? And
there are a lot of podcasts. There are many of them, as you know, as our listeners know, because they are in the podcast world. Which ones you should go on? Search or hire a firm like ours to do the search for you and to handle the booking, the management of it. I couldn't tell you what's the best one for you because there are so many out there.
It's an individual thing probably too, right?
It's really based on you, the person doing it, your business, your comfort level. All of those factors are going to play into what are the good podcasts. How often you do it, again, that's going to depend on what you're going for. If you're really trying to build a brand from nothing, getting out there frequently could be great for you. It provides content that you can use on your channels that'll be used on the host channels. If you're further down the road, if your business is more established, maybe your goal is to a month. That gives you what you need, balancing exposure, balancing content with you also need to do your job. You need to be doing that core thing that you do every day, whatever that is, CEO, president, CTO, ops, whatever. You still have to do that. As you know, doing a podcast, prepping for it takes time. Find that balance that works best for you and your business.
Absolutely, it takes time. I mean, today we're recording, I think, 5 episodes or 5 conversations. I don't call them episodes now, but and each one of them takes its time. And it's just from my perspective, I have to research the guests. I have to research what they're working on, what do they do, what they're interested in. And, I can't come into a conversation as a host and start talking about nothing. You got to drill in on the specific topics. A few days ago, I did an interview with one of the top neurosurgeon in the country, in the US. And that individual came out of his OR room. Still, he's got OR gear on him, the grub and everything, and, the scrub and everything, and just sitting down with me for an hour, explaining a specific innovation in a specific types of procedures. I had to really be familiar with those procedures. Am I in the medical field? No. But as a host, I have to do a lot of research on the topic. And by the end of it, I will be posting this episode in the next few days. I was so surprised that the doctor told me, he said, I don't know. I've been on many podcasts, but nobody really drilled into the topic from a knowledgeable point of view as you did. And to be frank with you and the audience, I'm not familiar with the topic at all. I did a lot of research on it, but it's not my background. It's not like I did medical school or anything. I'm a technologist by background. So we have to do our homework, both the guests and the host. If we don't do that, podcasting nowadays, everybody's doing it. Everybody thinks either if you're a small business owner or you're launching a new idea or a new business, there seems to be the magic formula is to go on podcast or to launch your own podcast. But there are techniques to do this. So you bring a value.
It is not something that you can just jump in and do cold. Like you said, it took you a lot of time to learn that content. As a guest, you prepare, your shows that you're going on.
Correct. And I don't know. Your agency provide the research and the direction for your customers to which podcast to go on. And I'm sure your agency found me somehow. So I appreciate that. Thank you for being on my podcast for that matter. And thanks for finding me. That's another one too. It takes a little bit of a hard work. I've been doing this for 2.5 years. And I can tell you, I started doing the post editing, manually, for instance, on my side, right? So, paying for people to do the video edits, paying for people to do the audio and a few other things. And that would take me 3-4 weeks to produce one episode. I'm thinking no, I like to accelerate a little bit better. So starting November last year, I started thinking about it differently and I started writing codes. I write codes. I'm a technologist by background. So I was writing some codes, integrating it, but with a little bit of an AI here and there. And now I reduced the post-editing time to literally an hour and a half. An hour and a half, 2 hours. I have an entire podcast edited, published, and blog post written. Everything is done from 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks. So, so that's the innovation that you put into your processes that allows me now, for instance, to produce or to record 4 podcasts today, and I'll probably take the weekend to publish them. So it takes a little bit of work. You have to put your mind into what you're doing, and in everything, I guess, not just podcasting, similar to what you do in your life. I mean, I see that you worked at DOJ and the Department of Commerce. I'm sure life was a little different for you there than where you are right now. And working for government agencies is not easy. I mean, versus startups. I mean, the discipline, the expectation, things are completely different. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
they are. Government has a lot more procedures compared to a startup. In part, the government has been there for a much longer time to develop the procedures. The startup might be employ 4, 5, 10, and you're fractional. They haven't had a need to develop some of the procedures yet. It isn't there. That's a big difference between the two, is the structure and the procedures and how you do things.
Now, for the audience, Joshua, a lot of people hear communication, chief communication officer, they're thinking PR. Are they missing anything?
They're missing a lot. PR is part of what we do. The PR has a lot of definitions. When most people think about, they think of media relations, journalists. It really is a conversation between entities, corporations, nonprofits, and their publics, is one of the definitions used by the Public Relations Society of America. Publics is stakeholders, how most people would think about it. What that means is PR includes a lot more than media relations. That is a very narrow part of what that is. And we do that. That is part of the services we provide. But we're also providing internal communications. We're providing messaging. We're doing investor relations, especially for startups who want pitch decks. We're also doing a lot of media training. So if you want to go on podcasts and you've never done it before and you're nervous, we do the training. We practice it. You get better at it. You'll know as well as anyone else, it is a skill that you develop over time. Like anything else is a skill that you develop over time.
Yeah,
I can practice with you.
I can look back at my early episode and I laugh. I say, I can't believe I recorded these things and published them. Now, for those of us who are thinking about internal, like outsourced model, like from a business perspective, for a communication officer to being a full-time person hired by those companies, why would they choose to go in an outsourced model versus internal hire?
The biggest reason that we come in is not it's outsourcing. We're fractional. We are part of your team as much as anyone else, but they're on a fractional basis. Sometimes that's 5 hours a month, up to 20 hours a week in some cases. The biggest reason is someone is doing a job they don't want to be doing. You have a president, a CEO, a founder, CTO often because they develop the website, whoever runs operations, a director of operations, a chief operating officer, they're doing the communications in the leadership role, maybe with an agency, maybe with a social media specialist, but they're the person managing it at the leadership level. And it's taking them 10 hours a week that they don't want to be doing because that's not their expertise. That's not their core job. But the business looks at it and say, we don't need a 40-hour-a-week person. This is only a 10-hour-a-week function for it. The person doesn't want to do the 10 hours a week. They can put that on a fractional employee like us, bring in the fractional chief communications officer, and take that function off their desk that they don't want to be doing. That's why we say we're the expert at communicating your expertise. Whatever it is you do, we communicate it.
And in general, in the US, obviously I am in Canada. I'm not that familiar with that picture in the US. Maybe you can educate me a little bit in the audience. The fractional model, let's say you're a fractional CCO. I am a fractional CRO, and I provide that service to some of my customers as well. And in addition to podcasting on the side, what is it about the model that the client respond to? Where do you think it still face some resistance? I think it's attractive, to be honest with you, for many reasons that you just described right now. For those who are hesitant about the model, why do you think they're still hesitant about it?
Unfamiliarity. They haven't used it before. That's probably the biggest reason. They don't understand how it'll work for them because it's new for them. And like anything else that's a little new, there's hesitation, there's nervousness, they want to know. And that's why what we're doing for them is very specific to the company. As you know, if you're doing fractional work, what that means in every company could be a little bit different, how they want that to be used. And it could also be different if we're 5 hours a week versus 20 hours a month in some cases. How that relationship works is going to change. But the biggest hesitation is unfamiliarity. And once they get into it, they realize that it's an employee just happens to be there 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of the time.
And it's probably less costly.
Much less costly. It doesn't come with the overhead of employee. It's not a full-time salary, which is one of the reasons a lot of the companies we work with hesitate to bring on someone in leadership for communications. It's only a 10-hour-a-week function for them, a 15-hour-a-week function for whoever's doing it, and the math doesn't work to make that a 40-hour-a-week position.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm seeing it like now on the CRO side, right? A lot of people, they want to work, they want CRO, they can't afford having, or even they can get a CRO in place, but probably not to the seniority level, not to the expertise that some of those veterans, such as yourself, like you've been there, you've done this. It's not like you're a junior on the scene here. You've been doing this for many years. So with seniority comes a little bit of more compensation, I would say. It costs more versus hiring somebody brand new into a position which they need to train. They need to get used to it. They got to make mistakes. They're going to fall and get up again, and that costs the business. To get somebody at a seniority level for the amount of money that they're paying on a fractional basis, I think it's a steal, but that's me thinking that. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And are you seeing that? Like, is there like an appetite for this in your world? Are people coming on?
There is. They want it. They don't necessarily know that's what they want because they're investigating. A lot of times, people will Google corporate communications officer. They'll be searching for something. They might be looking for an agency, but they get us because we're not an agency model, which is totally outsourced. What'll happen is maybe you already have a contract with a Google Ads agency who you like. We'll work with your Google Ads agency because that operations leader in your business is still the person managing that relationship, which is still taking them 2-3 hours a week that they don't want to be doing. We take that from that person and now are managing that relationship with whatever agency you're using. That's why that exactly what we're doing can be different. If you don't have an agency and you want Google Ads, we can provide that for you, or we can help you find an agency that you like. And just like if you had a full-time CCO in-house, that's exactly what we're doing, just fractionally.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the messaging, you've argued that communication is not a project-based, it's ongoing, which I agree with you. But some clients probably don't think the same way, maybe because of budget, because of many other reasons, timeline, etc. How do you convince them to change their mind on this one? What obstacles have you resolved in that direction?
A lot of times people come to us, we come in a little late in the game. They come to us, we're launching our product in a month or in 2 months. We've been developing it though for 2 years. And they see the marketing, the communications as the project that comes with launch. They see it as a goal, like email marketing. All we need is the email marketing or the social media marketing. We work with them to show them how these things are connected, because they are, and how you need to start building that foundation very early. I mentioned before, our story, narrative, and brand framework. People come to us when they're at or past brand. It's there, it's developed. When they really should have come to us is at the story part, where we go and develop the story. That way we're not working backwards and have a lot in place already, because we could really start developing that from the beginning and making sure all your communications fit in with the narrative that you want to share.
Now, in communication, generally speaking, and depends on the market, depends on the demographic that each product is trying to address or each project is trying to address. Generally, we're dealing with multiple languages. Do you come across a language component in your communication plans, and how do you deal with that?
I have come across it. How it gets dealt with is different. When government's dealing with it, they have translators.
So
it goes out to translators who have contracts with government. That's not an automatic process. Although now it is becoming a little, if you go, and I have not worked on this in a government capacity, but if you just go to a government website, you'll see some automatic translating. And this is for US government. You'll see some of this there. That's also how a lot of private companies do it, is they're relying on tools like Google Translate, and they're adding it to their websites and putting it in. Mm-hmm. If they have printed communications that are in different languages, they'll use Google Translate. Be careful with that. It's not great.
I know.
It does a very good job for a lot of things. It has more, real-time website-based translating than you could ever do yourself. But it can also, as we've all experienced it, do some very interesting mistranslations at times. So if something is higher stakes, get a real person who speaks the language and knows how to translate it.
There's a lot of horror stories out there, Joshua. I interviewed one of the founding engineers of Google Translate, who owns his own company now called Model Front. That's the name of the company. And the name of the individual is Adam Beetelmeyer. And I interviewed him a few weeks ago. It's on my podcast. Feel free to check him out. Check out the podcast I meant. It is very interesting conversation when he talks about what went well and what did not go well, and why people are looking at different models to do more trusty translation, I would say, versus doing something that you think it's done right and then it blows up in somebody's face in terms of, oh, we translated it wrong, or we captured the wrong meanings, or the messaging was different, specifically on, and I call it the unilingual curse. So you only speak one language and you're translating into many other languages. There's no way for you to judge it. You just have to take it at face value, say, oh, it must be right. It was done by this tool or the other tool. And this is where, it doesn't go well.
That's why, if you're on a live website, you can use the Google tools, have it integrated. People can use it on their side, on the client side, and it will translate into more languages than you could possibly have translators for. You might have people on your staff or who you can hire to translate maybe a couple of core languages that you have a need for, and not do all of them, because you can't. There's no way a business could translate manually into all the languages that Google Translate can do automatically. It's more than is feasible.
And there's a surge in content, level. Right? There's a surge in content. The amount of content is growing.
Yes. There's more content now than ever. We create a lot of content. We have systems to help people create content, because that's really what people are looking for. I mentioned, things like authenticity. People want authenticity, and that comes with content. You need something that is authentic about you and your business.
Correct. Now, Beltway Media, how big is your company, Joshua? Is it yourself, or you got people working with you?
We've got people, and it'll scale based on project.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not sure if you heard my question. Is Beltway Media, is it like one individual company, or you got some staff working with you?
No, we have people who are part of it, and we'll scale team based on a project and its need. Because like I said, we could be 5 hours a month, we could be 20 hours a week, we could have a need for Google Ads, we could have a need for SEO. It just varies based on that project. How we do it for each team, it's going to scale.
Okay. So you got access to resources, right, Joshua? If you need them. Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about AI. I mean, you can't escape any conversation nowadays without talking about AI. And I've, through the conversation that we were having earlier and through the research that I've done a little bit before this call, it looks like you've used tools like Gumloops or Abacus, or even your own AI, I heard, in your own workflow. Where is AI generally earning its place right now in the communication, in your opinion, the communication operations stream, if you will? Or where is it producing content that looks like right, but no, it doesn't land?
It's a tool, like any other tool. If you gave me a hammer, you'll maybe get a slanted birdhouse a bird doesn't want to live in. If you give a master craftsman a hammer, you'll get a structurally sound, aesthetically pleasing home that families can live in for more than 100 years. The difference is the user. It's the same hammer. AI works very similarly. It's a tool, and how you use that tool is going to change the output. We use it a lot for research. It is a great tool for research, provided that you verify the facts that it returns. They aren't always real. Verify it. We had to do research for, I think it was 20 to 25 cities, and get fairly standard demographic information from these cities. It's essentially running a lot of Google searches and getting each city's Office of Public Records, the state's Office of Health, all of that. That takes a human a lot of time, but it's something AI can do quickly and efficiently as long as you prompt it well. If you just say Rome, does it go to Rome, Italy, Rome, Georgia, Rome, New York? You have to be specific. And we had to make sure everything was in there. We had to say exactly the city that we needed. We had to give the state, the country where it was relevant, all of those details. We had to say, provide the sources. And it was able to do everything and make it readable for us much faster than a human could do. And then a human was able to focus on what we humans do well. Analyzing the data, interpreting it. What does it mean? How does it fit into the business? All of that information. That is where we do much better. In terms of content creation, it is great at certain things. It doesn't do a great job putting out final products. We all have seen the AI, what has been termed AI slop is the phrase that has been coined for it. We've all seen it. We know some of the hallmarks of AI content. It's great for drafts. It's even better to produce outlines. It is not making a final product worthy of being a final product.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Now, so one of the things that we've seen over time, and from a communication perspective, now we've seen that specifically, I think you've made the point on this one, that email was supposed to simplify work, or then we were supposed to see Slack replacing, Slack, the app. For those individuals who are not familiar with that, Slack is another app like WhatsApp and a few other tools out there, but Slack was supposed to replace email. And now we've got AI transcribing meetings and conferences or virtual meetings. Every meeting now is being transcribed in using AI. One time last week, I had a meeting. I think I had 6 people on the phone on the conference. Like every one of them brought their own tool with them, and we ended up with 14 participants in the meeting. Half of them are AI nodes are trying to take notes of the meeting. I think it's okay, but are we actually solving this is what I always think about. Are we solving a communication problem? Are we communicating better, or just producing more?
We're producing a lot more. Whether or not it's better is in the eye of the beholder. More doesn't equal better. Are those 7 AI transcribe tools conflicting with each other? No. Everyone's just getting their own transcript at the end of it. They're not conflicting, not creating more that you can use. When you have teams using email plus Slack plus SharePoint plus something else, then you're adding on. Sometimes you have to look back at your communications channels, internal and external channels, and see what's effective and what isn't. What can you cut? Sometimes you cut and you get a better result. If you're putting a lot of effort into Pinterest and that's not really helping your business, but you're putting a lot of time into it, that is something you can cut and devote those resources elsewhere. You don't have to be on everything to get those results.
Does anybody come to you, Joshua, and say, hey, listen, I'm going to write my brand copy using AI? Has anybody been crazy enough to tell you that, or what?
We've gotten people who want to use AI in different capacities.
In a sensitive manner, like in the brand copy category, or just some adjacent content that nobody looks at?
Well, all the content's brand content. If brand is everything a person interacts with, your audience interacts with, that's all brand content. So people want to use it. I haven't had someone who said yet that they want to go fully automated, fully AI, direct publishing. And part of that could be it's not how we do things. It's something that we talk about, that how we use it. I'm talking about it on a podcast. I don't hide that we use AI. I build custom automations for our own firm and for clients that we use. I use things like Abacus that you mentioned. I use Gumloop, has been a great tool for workflows that we've made, really custom, very complicated custom agents. But we're just, we don't hide that we're using these tools. And I think that changes that people are not coming to us saying, I want a fully automated workflow, because we are making a point that it is a human plus AI workflow. Like it was a human plus Microsoft Word using spell check. And if we didn't have spell check, we wouldn't want to read anything I wrote.
We all make typos. Which AI model that you think for your business is better than the other? Do you use Anthropic? What is it? Which one? OpenAI? Which one do you use?
So one of the things I like about both of these tools that I'm using primarily, Abacus and Gumloop, is you have access to all of the models, or I won't say all, many of the models. And you have access to, there'll be new ones by the time this airs probably, have, Sonnet, you have Opus, Claude Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, you have ChatGPT, 3, 4, 5 of the different types. They have Gemini, they have Grok, they have all these different options. And based on what you're doing, it can suggest some. And it does different things are better with different models because they're trained differently. For a lot of research, I think depending on what you're doing with it, some of the more advanced OpenAI models are good. And I've also found the Claude models to be pretty good as well.
Now, if you were to be advising, let's say, a global company, and I'm sure, in your world, probably you've seen some of those. Somebody's launching something global, a product, a service, etc. And would you advise them to seek professional translation services, or you probably get them to handle it themselves? Is the discussion around, let's get some help on professional translation, does that even come up?
It comes up, and like I mentioned before, what you need to do with professional translation is really find that balance between what are your core languages and what aren't. Because like I mentioned, you cannot get all the languages in Google Translate. Get professional translation for the things you need in the languages that make sense for your business.
In general, Joshua, are people still, in your opinion, building in English first and then languages later, or are they just going global immediately?
Most people are, if they're going to think about other languages, we found, at least introduce the idea early because they know it's going to be a part of it. If for no other reason than if they're using professional translation services, it factors into the budget. So they're thinking about it in that context. But they're also thinking about length. If you build a website, you have to factor in how it displays, how you do alignments. Languages are written differently. They have different types of characters, all of that, which means you do need to think about it early, just like you would think about anything else that presents challenges with glyphs, with display, with how people experience the content. It comes in with that discussion.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the craft itself. You've been on the Telly Award Judging Council and more than 2 decades. When you watch a piece of communication, Joshua, a piece of work that it is genuinely moves you, what's happening in that most people or most other pieces of work misses? You think the characterization of a good work versus some other one that doesn't qualify?
There's usually something intangible.
Yep.
There is that wow factor in a lot of cases. There is that it just worked. That it works, and you can't necessarily explain what brought all those pieces together because it did. It worked. A lot of times there's an artistic character to it, but not always. And artistic doesn't necessarily mean painting. That writing is an art. It's written very well. It moves emotions. So that intangible is, in many cases, it moved your emotions somehow, as opposed to an instruction manual, which is very clean, hopefully, direct, hopefully, getting to the point. Again, hopefully it's a good instruction manual. That is not meant to move you, as some documentaries, as some films, as some magazine articles, as some corporate posts are designed to do. And when something does that, and you take a step back because it worked. And I know you were looking probably for do X, Y, Z, and it'll be that thing that moves you, or maybe some artist merit, but you could respect the artist. You might not be able to look at a masterpiece painting and say, it's the brushstrokes that are perfect for me. But that the artist brought all the pieces together, which is really what it's about.
You just reminded me, I got to tell this anecdote. I was 14 years old, maybe 13 years old. I grew up in Beirut during the Civil War back in the days, in the 70s and the 80s. And I participated in a art competition. It was a watercoloring competition, so we can draw something. And then everybody in the age group in the country participated, and it goes in front of a judging committee and whatever. I'm a kid. I'm at a classroom. I hate art class. It's not my thing. And then I ended up in an art class, and I got to do this thing. So I did it, and I forgot about it. And I am 100% certain I'm not the best in the class. I'm the last one in the class when it comes to art or anything like this. Now, get the surprise. I got called to the principal's office. I thought I'm getting in trouble. And then I go into the office, and the principal of the school is there, and my art teacher was sitting there with him. And I thought, I'm definitely in trouble. I'm not. Normally, the art teacher is not happy with me. And they said, "Okay, sit down." I sit down and said, "We got a good news for you." So I was just shocked. Kid, you won the competition. I said, "I won the competition? Are you kidding?" He said, "No, you won the competition." I couldn't believe it. They handed me the envelope. It was signed by the president of the country. I had to go to a ceremony where they displayed this thing in a big theater, like my work. And everybody, all the artists were gathered around it. Everybody was critiquing it. And my teacher was with me. She said to me, I said, "What do I do with this?" She said, "Why don't you go to these people and ask them, why did they select your..." I mean, I'm looking at other work in the pavilion where they held this thing. Much better work. Mine, it looks like a child threw something on the wall and put it together. So I asked one of the judging people there, the judge, and I said to him, I said, so why is this one? I'm the guy who did this. I'm the kid who did this. Why did you select this one? And he talked for a while, but I can still remember the word innocence. He said, this reflects innocence. It is not on purpose. It was like, sort of like, you did not really plan it. It was more like a child who is innocent, who has now oblivion of everything and just put it together. I said, oh, that's why you selected? I've got a lot of innocence left in me. Maybe I'll paint a few others. It goes to your point. And I was just telling the story just to validate your point. A lot of times, there is no specific criteria for the art. Sorry about that. So for somebody who's listening to this, what do you want them to take away from this conversation, Joshua?
Look at the story, narrative, brand framework. You really need to be working on that from the beginning, because if you're really starting to think about your communications at the end, at that brand stage, it's already too late. Bring communications in from the start. Think about how those 4 languages, how you're using them, how you're using read, see, hear, and experience, and how they're amplifying each other in your communications. Also, we always tell people, be the signal, not the noise. Communicate strategically, not voluminously. You don't need to put out 5 pieces of content a day. You don't need to respond to every comment. Respond to comments strategically. Put out content strategically. Do what makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, despite all the blog posts or tips that you might have read, like I said, this does not exist in nature. You can break those rules and the laws of physics don't break. You can still do what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I want to wrap it up here. We're coming up to time, Joshua. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you did too.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to, leave the opportunity for you. If you have any last comments you want to share with the audience, something that we probably haven't covered that you like to cover. I know if somebody wants to get a hold of you and they can't find you, Joshua Altman, ladies and gentlemen, he's on LinkedIn and he's connected to me. I think I sent you a connection request, Joshua. And if anybody wants to connect with Joshua and can't find him, just link up with me and I will be happy to facilitate an introduction. Anything else you'd like to add, Joshua, before we close off the conversation?
Always email me as well,jaltman@beltway.media. We have free tools on our website. We have checklists, self-guided tools that you can use to see your communications. We have these things we call the communications quick guides. They are there for you. They are free to download for you to see how your business is doing communications at certain stages. Very simple, laid out. You could write on them. They have a lot of white space. They're really designed to be used as worksheets for you, as conversation starters. If you do call us, they're there to really help you with your communications.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you, Joshua, for being with me today, for having a conversation with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for taking the time. I also want to thank our audience for joining us. If you're coming on YouTube, thanks for watching us. And if you're joining us on the audio podcast, thanks for listening in. And if you're reading our blog where we summarize these conversations on robinayoub.blog, thank you. And thanks for subscribing to the blog as well. I thank you so much for everybody for staying with us throughout this conversation. And I'll see you at the next episode. Thanks, Josh. See you later.